Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Morbid and Unhealthy. I'm Morgan Scorpion. This is my YouTube channel, and tonight I have the great pleasure and privilege of being able to interview Mr. Jeffrey Thomas. Would you like to introduce yourself briefly, Jeff?
Sure, Julie. I'm Jeffrey Thomas. I'm a writer. I have written numerous novels and short stories in the horror and science fiction genres and blending such genres. Some of my books include the short story collection Punktown, published in 2000, and more recently the novel The American, published by Journal Stone. And my most recent novels are The Exploded Soul, which is a science fiction novel from Weird House Press, and Gods of a Nameless Country, a short story collection from Journalstone.
So I've noticed that your Wikipedia entry is extremely long. How many books altogether do you think you've written?
I don't, I don't know. I don't know. I would have to go to Wikipedia to count them. Plus the various translations. There's been a lot that's been
Hmm.
translated to German, some into Russian, Greek, Chinese, and so forth. Um, and then there's been multiple editions of some. Some have been like special editions, hardcover or paperbacks, and reissues. And when some things have gone out of print,
Hmm.
after a while, I've republished them myself so that they would remain in print. Um, for instance, my novels Deadstock and
Yeah.
Blue were published some years ago by Solaris. They were my most widely distributed books, but eventually it went out of print, and so I
Mm.
took it on myself and released ebook versions of those. So all told, I don't I don't know, quite a few.
I would estimate about 45, possibly 50.
Yeah, it could be.
And So, who inspired you, or did any particular individual inspire you to start writing?
I don't think any particular individual, but um, it could be genetic in that my father was a poet, and
Yeah.
he published. He had his poems appear in local newspapers. And my mom wrote poetry, and she wrote a newspaper column. My sister Wendy wrote a newspaper column for a while when she
Yeah.
was a teenager. My brother Scott, is another writer of horror with multiple books out. And my brother Craig is a creative person into music, and he's been into calligraphy and so forth. And it's just I think it was just growing up in that kind of artistic, creative environment. And my father was also a painter, and like I said, it was just a creative environment where we loved reading and movies and so forth. So there could be a genetic component or an environmental component. But I would say my family was a huge inspiration.
Yes, I've read some of your brother Scott's books as well, and I believe you collaborated with him on a collection, didn't you?
Yeah, we collaborated on a book called The Sea of Flesh and Ash, where we each wrote a novella. His was
Yeah.
the Sea of Ash. Mine was the Sea of Flesh. And then later on, those we went on to publish those separately to reach a wider audience. Uh, so we've actually collaborated for surprisingly little, because I think it's because we both
Mm.
have our own vision. But Scott did
Yeah.
collaborate with me on a book called Punktown Shades of Grey. Punktown
Yeah.
is a setting that I've written about. It's a far future city full of crime and everything. On another planet, it's full of alien races and so forth. So I've written
Mm.
quite a few stories in Punktown. So for that one particular book,
Yeah.
Scott wrote half of the short stories in that book, and I wrote the other half. So that's probably our biggest collaboration.
And you also collaborated with our mutual friend, Mr. W.H. Pugmire. What was that like?
Yes, I was just about to say that because speaking about Scott, my collaboration with Scott, it was very much like my collaboration with Willem.
Mm.
Um, I think that my collaboration with Willem was maybe the most enjoyable time I've ever had writing a book, because
Yeah.
he was he was my dear friend. He was my best writer friend I've ever had, and he was just such a lovely person. I loved him, and we had a lot of fun writing that. At first, when Willem came to me knowing that I'm an artist, and he had the idea to write this character Enoch Coffin, who was an artist, kind of in the vein of Pickman. Lovecraft's
Mm.
Pikmin. So knowing that I'm an artist, he thought that I could collaborate on him with a series of stories about this character in a coffin that he was devising. But at first, we didn't know how we were going to go about it. If maybe we would literally collaborate on each individual story. He'd write a few pages, I'd write a few pages. We didn't know. Eventually, we decided. I think it was Willem who suggested this, and I thought, when he said that, I thought it would be the best approach.
Yeah.
We would each write a number of stories about Enoch Coffin, and then kind of mix them together in the book. And that worked out really well. So as we wrote them, we kept
Yeah.
reading each other's stories and building on certain details from those stories. And another thing we did was Willem focused his stories on Lovecraft's fictitious cities, Arkham and Dunwich
Yeah.
and so forth. And I focused my stories on actual locations in New England, such as Salem and so forth. And somehow our that recipe worked, and it all came together. And I think it worked primarily because it wouldn't have worked unless I loved his writing so much and
Yes.
could get into make it synthesize with his because he had a very particular style, and it was a little tricky, but that it was, like I said, so fun, so fun.
Did you ever get to meet personally?
Only once at Necronomicon in Providence, Rhode Island, in 2013, I think, was the only chance. I mean, we talked we wrote each other. We had many letters. It was a correspondence
Yes.
back in the early 90s. We wrote to each other constantly. I've kept Willem's letters. And also then we started communicating through audio cassettes. And
Oh,
Willem would read stories, and he read my entire book Punktown to me in audio cassettes. He read it my own stories back to me, and he made when I found out that my son Colin was autistic, Willem was very touched, and he made an audio
yeah.
cassette for Colin that I played for Colin many times with songs and Willem singing, and he was just such a dear person, you know.
Yes.
But at
Yes.
Necronomicon, it was so weird because that was the only time I met him in person, and it freaked me out because it wasn't real. I'm meeting Willem in
Mm.
person. I knew uh, you know, it's so different. I didn't know he was so tall, for
Yeah.
instance, and it was
Oh,
and it was so weird that as close as we were at the convention,
yeah.
I felt so awkward that we interacted very little. And of course, you're interacting with so
It's
many people at conventions, and
yes.
you never spend as much time with any individual as you wish you could. So I regret that we didn't spend as much time as we could have at the convention. But when he was passing away, he was declining. He was in hospice care, and St. Joshi, his friend, was uh, with him. So
Yes.
I called Willem and I spoke to him a little bit, and I just wanted to let him know because I knew he was declining. I wanted to let him know how much he had meant to me, how much I valued him
Yes.
and loved him. And so we
Yes.
spoke a little bit, and luckily, because we often say when it's somebody that is important to us is passed away, oh, I wish I'd been able to tell them I love them one last time. Or
Yes.
so I was able to do that. And the last thing I heard as I was hanging up the phone was
Mm.
Willem saying, "I love you." And I
Oh.
called back the next day, and St. Joshi picked up and he said, "Willem isn't able to talk now." And I just said, "Okay, please just let me know."
Yes.
And so he sent me an email shortly thereafter and let me know that Willem had passed. And so, but
Yes.
it was at least rewarding that I was able to tell him how important he was to me as a friend and as an creative
Yes.
inspiration.
That is very touching. I didn't have that opportunity. It was just a few texts
Hmm.
when Joe P had fallen so ill.
Yeah.
Just a text from Willem saying he had the feeling that he wasn't going to see Joe again, and yeah, and but at least he did leave a wonderful legacy behind him, and I've had the great pleasure of being able to record some of his stuff for my YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And I've had the great pleasure of being able to record some of your stuff for my YouTube channel.
Yeah. I think it's like
And
8 stories maybe by now you've done over the past 10 years.
yes, I've done 6 or 7, I think.
Yeah, quite a
I'm
few.
not
Yeah.
sure quite how many.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hope to do some more. But the one
So,
that I enjoyed recording the most was Open Minded,
oh, yes.
which I love. I love the MIGO. I love it whenever they show up in a story.
Yeah.
And so when did you discover Lovecraft and how?
Oh, okay. I was Lovecraft was a name I was aware of, but never as a kid, but I never really had read him. And I read a
Oh,
story called Jerusalem's Lot in a collection by Stephen King. I think it was Night Shift.
yeah,
And
I think so.
I loved it. I thought, boy, this is a different tone for King. I love this tone. It's so different for him. Not realizing it was an homage to Lovecraft. So when I
Yes.
realized that, I thought, I guess if I love this story so much, I better look for the real thing. I better look for Lovecraft. So I think it was 1985, and I went to the library and I took out a book that had the Call of Cthulhu, and I think it was the Testament of Randolph Carter, or the Statement of Randolph
Mm,
Carter, or maybe it was in the vault in the Statement of Randolph Carter. But anyway,
right.
I started with a couple of short stories in a library book, and then loved it. And then I bought all the Lovecraft books that were put out by Del
Yeah.
Rey back then with the Michael Whelan covers. And I just
Mm.
read them back to back. And I just thought, this is what I've been waiting for all my life. I just love his work.
So is he a great inspiration for you?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I try not I didn't want to just be known as like a Lovecraft imitator. So I try
Yes.
not to write too many stories in the mythos, but it just it's like the Godfather 3 says. Every time I try to get it, they pull me back in. And so if I'm not writing something connected to his world for some anthology I've been invited to,
Mm,
I'm just unconsciously writing something with a Lovecraftian flavor or cosmic horror flavor. It's when something touches you so much and you love it so much, it's hard to escape that
yes.
influence. So I should just embrace it, I guess.
Hmm. Yes, Lovecraft's invisible tentacles won't let us go,
Yes,
but
yeah,
I'm very grateful for that.
yeah.
Which brings me on to the Lovecraft e-zine. When
Hmm.
did you start writing for that?
Geez, I don't remember. I mean, I was invited to write I've over the years a couple short stories for the easing. A few come to mind, and then Mike Davis asked me to put a book together, a collection together for him, which became my book, The Endless Fall. And so I have a great fondness for the Lovecraft zine, as you may imagine, and they've had me on as a guest many times. And Mike Davis is a fantastic person, and such a supportive person in our circle. And he also published my brother's book, The Sea of Ash, and uh,
Yes.
and uh, and yeah, like I say, I think Mike has been
Yeah.
very valuable, and the e-zine has been very valuable. He's interviewed so many people in our field, and he's an inspiration, and
Yeah.
he's massively supportive.
You had your own indie press at one point, didn't you? The Necropolitan Press.
Yes, yes. I
Any
put out
plans to revive it?
no,
Any
no,
plans to revive it? No?
no. Yeah, in the early '90s, I put out 4 issues of a little zine called The End, and
Yeah.
it was a lot of fun, and and uh, and putting it together. And at that time, I worked in a print shop, and I would sometimes in my own time use like the light table at work or the cameras at work to
Yeah.
take pictures, and that I would use. That back in those days, it wasn't there wasn't digital publishing like there is now.
Right.
Everything was like we would at this print shop we would literally cut and paste and glue,
Yeah.
use a white light table, and those are the techniques that I used to compose the issues of
Mm.
the end. And it was fun, but it was very time consuming. And then it was hard to get them distributed and
Yes.
to sell them. I also did put out a few chapbooks, though. I put out a chapbook of my own stories called The Bones of the Old Ones. I did one of Willem's stories. It was actually, I think, his first American collection called Tales from Sesqua Valley. And I put out a chapbook
Right.
of a novella by Jeff Vandermeer called The Early History of Ambergris. So I
Right.
worked with some really fantastic people, and
Yes, absolutely.
it was fun, but as I say, time consuming. And so I ended up not pursuing it after a few years.
That's a shame that it had to close down, but
Mhm.
the practicalities of these things, well, it's over my head like a balcony. Um, I'm just seriously grateful for the internet as being a way to disseminate these things much more easily.
Yes, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
And it's so much easier now to put like I said, when
Mm.
one of my books goes out of print, I can take it over to Amazon and very easily make an ebook out of it.
Yes.
And unfortunately, it's so easy now that there's the Amazon just swamped with uh,
Yes.
books of dubious quality. So people have to kind of wade through that to see what's of value.
I kind of enjoy the wading process, especially considering how many cheap books there are, 99p or 99 cents if
Mhm,
and quite a few free ones as well. There's a lot of
mhm.
tricky marketing techniques whereby they give you the first 3 volumes free, but you've got to pay 20 quid to get the fourth, which,
Oh yeah. Oh my goodness. But yeah, no, there are definitely people of with a lot of talent. If you just know can
mm,
kind of sift through, and you'll find somebody like Matthew Bartlett whose book
yes,
Gateways to Abomination um, is really excellent, and he published it himself. And
mm,
that's a good example right there that there are things of value if you
yes.
can find the diamond in the coal heap.
Yes, and I'm thinking of The Lord Came at Twilight by Daniel Mills, which
Yeah,
I'm surprised doesn't get a lot more love. But
yeah,
I'm still pushing it. Push, push. And if
yeah.
I can ever find him on social media, I'll ask permission to do one of his stories. Of the people writing in the genre today, do you have any favorites?
Sure. Sure. So many, in fact, that my
Mm,
mind kind of jams up trying to think of just a few to isolate. But people like Laird Barron, of course, and Nathan
yes,
Ballingrud, who have, but they've kind of taken that step beyond to mass uh, success as well.
yes.
Um, but just so many people, talented people like Gemma Files and
Mm-hmm.
Simon Strancis and Richard Gavin and of course my brother Scott and
Yes,
um, Jaya Kaprash Satamurthy is excellent and uh,
absolutely.
and there's just so many. I just it's just so I don't know where to begin. But if I sat here, I could just keep rattling off names, pulling them out of my head.
So, how big is your to be read pile?
Oh my gosh, it's infinite. It's infinite. I've got a pile beside my desk here of things that I am reading, but because I can never
Yes,
read one book at a time, I alternate, and I often alternate between a book of short stories and a novel. Right now, though, I have two novels going, one by Tim Waggoner and one by
yeah.
Marguerite Duras. Um,
Oh,
because I don't only read in the genre in the
yes,
fantastical genres, but behind me, mountains of to be read book piles, and
yeah.
it's never ending.
So, what other genres do you like?
Uh, Pretty much anything, but fiction. I tend not to read
Yes,
nonfiction. I might read in a nonfiction book out of sequence, set passages, and so forth. And
Yeah.
but I tend not to read nonfiction books cover to cover. So it's but in terms of
Mm.
fiction, I love a good thriller. Like one of my favorite authors is Martin Cruz Smith, who writes the Arkady Renko books from Gorky
Ah,
Park and so forth. And
didn't he
Thomas,
write Nightwing
yes, he did.
about bats?
Yes,
Yes.
and I read
Yes, I
that.
read that.
I read it a few months ago. In fact, finally,
Ah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, they made it into a film with David Warner, which
yes.
for the life of me, I can't remember whether I've seen. It came out so long ago. So he's still going strong, is he?
Well, I don't know if I'd say he's going strong. He has Parkinson's disease, and he's in his early 80s. But he just did come out with a book not that long ago called Independent Square. It was another Arkady Renko book.
Oh,
It's my
ah,
understanding, I may be wrong, that he narrates his books now to his wife or someone, and they help him.
all right.
But it wasn't his best book, but by God, compared to what most people could do, he's still, very talented. It
Mm.
was very engaging. It kept me going. And I just love that whole Arkady Renko series. Probably Red Square and Wolves Eat Dog.
Mm.
Actually, no. Actually, my favorite probably in that series is one called Polar. Uh, what's it called? A Polar Star, in which the
Ah,
whole novel takes place on a Russian fishing boat. So I love his work. I love Thomas Harris. Uh,
yes.
so people like that who can write a really riveting thriller. And but I also read like uh, one of my favorite authors is Thomas Hardy, and I
Mm.
love his novels, his short stories, his poems.
Well, he wrote some pretty harsh short stories, if I remember. One about a hanged man. What was that one called?
The withered with
Um,
withered arm was it?
the Withered Arm. That's it. Yes.
Yes,
Yes. That's
and
rather full on.
another one that he wrote was quite macabre, and another one he wrote
Mm.
that had that kind of tone, almost like a gothic horror tone, was Barber of the House of Grebe,
Oh,
and
the woman who made the statue of her dead
yes,
lover.
exactly. That's the
Yes.
one. Yep. And the jealous it was her husband and her jealous lover destroyed the face of
Mm.
the statue because her husband had been disfigured in the war. Um,
Ah.
I also love Yukio Mishima. I've read quite a few of his novels and short
Never
stories.
Let Me Go. Oh, no, sorry. The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea.
Yes, that's him. Yes,
That was another one with a pretty horrible ending.
it's very yeah,
Um,
very dark.
yeah, did he commit suicide?
He did. He committed seppuku, and he had taken over uh, some kind of military school because he had this kind of strange nationalistic little band he put together
Yeah.
uh, because he was obsessed with the emperor and so forth. And so they took over the school and he gave a speech, and then he committed seppuku, and his second, decapitated him.
Yes.
It was quite a unique character.
Certainly sounds like it. I wonder what the emperor made of him. Or does the Japanese emperor ever make public statements about things like
Yeah, I
that?
don't know. I don't know. I don't know enough to know that if the emperor was even still alive at that point. It just took place in the was it the early 70s or late 60s, early 70s, I think. Um, but it was quite a scene. I think in a way, though, I think ultimately
Mm.
that was kind of a performance art for him. I, I
Yes.
more than anything.
Going out with a bang.
Yeah, yeah. He wanted to die young and beautiful. You know.
Well, he died young.
Yeah, yes, yes. Well, he had been a very sickly and scrawny young man,
Yes.
and he built himself up. He worked out. He trained with a sword and everything, and
Oh, like Robert E. Howard.
yeah, yeah, and yes, and it was kind of like I think to compensate with Mishima, and I think, and then he
Yes.
reached this kind of pinnacle of what he felt like he had achieved, and then he wanted to go out like you said with a bang and in a blaze of glory, you know, live fast, uh, leave a good corpse or a
Die
beautiful corpse.
young, yes.
Yeah, but he's fascinating. He's a fascinating person to read, and I also
Well, I
like
remember.
yes. Oh, I was going to
Oh,
say
I
also,
remember Jean.
please go.
You go first.
No, 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 because I'm going to probably take us in a different direction.
Well, just to say that I was introduced to Mishima by Jean-Jacques Burnel of the Stranglers, Apparently,
Oh,
his song "Death and Night and Blood" was dedicated to Yukio Mishima. I
I'm going.
remember loving that song, and I
I,
also remember going through town in the early hours of the morning with my friends, ch- chanting "Death and Night and Blood." So miraculously, nobody called the police on us. But I'm kind of embarrassed. I wish I hadn't done that now.
well, that's
But,
that.
teenage brat. But I'd love to hear what direction you're going to take this in.
Well, actually, I want to go back to what you just said because I was trying to think of his motto, and when we were
Mm.
talking about him going out in a blaze of glory, and I couldn't think of it. And that's what was his motto. What you said, that the death and night and blood.
Oh,
That was his aesthetic, and I was trying to grasp for that, and you just stated it. And I didn't know that song existed. Actually, I have to seek that out.
oh, absolutely. I can't remember the name of the album. Oh, yes, I can. It was Black and White. And I was a big fan of the Stranglers as a teenager. Great band.
Ah,
Yeah. So, out of interest, did you have any favourite teen? Of course you had. What were your favourite teenage bands?
my favorite teenage bands. It's kind of embarrassing. No, they weren't like very punk or edgy kind of bands. But I liked as a kid. I liked Elton John when I was as
Hmm.
back in the mid '70s. I was a big huge
Yes.
fan of Elton John, and
Well, his Yellow Brick Road's just one of the best albums ever made.
yeah, yeah,
There's
for sure.
no debate about that one. It's just
Well,
sheer brilliance.
and I
But
went from like I was a big fan of Fleetwood Mac and
mm,
Bruce Springsteen, and those were that was when my love of music really crystallized. Those
yes.
acts like that, and then later it became as I've gotten older, it was like Elvis Costello and so forth. And but I don't have I don't have very edgy tastes. I love a pretty song, you know.
You like Mishima, but
Yeah,
you don't have edgy taste in music, I take it.
right, right. No, not really, not really. I mean, occasionally I like in just the past few years, I've been drawn to Faith No More, decades after the height of their popularity.
Hmm.
But I very interested in Mike Patton as a creative person because he's very experimental. He's done a lot of bizarre musical projects, and I like now following his
Yeah.
his different, like I said, his different experimental ventures.
So tell me a little bit about the town that you grew up in.
Ah, that would be Westboro, Massachusetts, and I spent most of my life
Oh,
there.
Lovecraft Country.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. I've lived in Massachusetts all my life, and
Hmm.
most of it in Westboro, and I still have a great fondness for it. And I go back there often. I'm not too far from it, about 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Um, and I go back there often because they have there's different restaurants and stores and whatnot, and
Yeah.
that I like there. And my parents are buried there, and I go visit their grave often. And so, like I said, I have quite an attachment there, quite an attachment.
Yes.
And my son does too. My son is autistic. He's 31 now. And the other day he was here
Yeah.
at my house. I have him. He lives with his mom, and but I have him every weekend for one day.
Yeah.
And the other day he was making a slideshow on my computer, and he found pictures of our old one of the last house we lived in Massachusetts, in Westboro.
Mm.
And he was making a slideshow, and he overlaid the song "My Dark Life" by Elvis Costello. He has his creative in his own way. And as he played it for me, he wanted me to watch it and play it. He started getting teary eyed, and he was trying.
Mm.
I realized what he was trying to express, because being autistic, he can't express himself in a straightforward way. You have to kind of read Colin. He was
Yes.
expressing nostalgia for having lived in that house and having been a child,
Ah.
and I thought I was touched by that because he's still mysterious to me in some ways. And
Yes.
I thought, well, Colin, you are like, you and I are alike in that sense, because I'm very nostalgic, very sentimental, and that showed
Mm.
me that Colin is too. It's just that he doesn't articulate it in a typical way.
Yes. So, were there any local myths and legends that you grew up hearing?
Yeah, it's I there was a little bit of talk about a
Mm,
Sasquatch-like creature that lived in Cedar Swamp, which is a swamp beyond the grave, just right at the periphery of the graveyard where
yeah.
my parents are buried. I think there some people claim to have seen something like that over in there. Um,
Mm,
Not a lot. There's also the story about an Indian princess, or sorry, Native American princess would
yeah.
be the term now, who drowned in Lake Hockomock, or she was drowned or murdered
Yeah.
in Lake Hockomock. And supposedly there's a ghost of her there. And you'll
Mm,
find that legend in certain books of local ghost stories and so forth. But not too much in that sense. But I have a lot of personal experiences, uh, strange personal experiences in that house that I just referred to that my son was nostalgic for.
right.
There's even so many that I wouldn't even know where to begin with them. I've talked about them a lot on the Lovecraft
Yeah.
Evening Show, but there was a lot of strange experiences there that I had, my brother Scott had, my sister had, uh,
Yes.
in that particular house. Too many to just kind of dismiss, in my opinion.
What sort of experiences, like poltergeist
Well,
experiences?
I'll give a few examples. I was telling my ex-wife about this the other day when we went through Westboro and went past the house that she and I had lived in, and I told her some of the stories that had occurred to me while we were there,
Mm,
and she experienced one story, one of those things, events herself. My ex-wife and I were in bed, and we saw a head lean into the doorway. The head kind of like leaned in, like looked at us like this, and pulled away. And it was just
right.
like a black shape. But we both saw it, and
Mm,
we were frightened, obviously. Another time,
yes.
I was there alone, and I worked at night, and I lay down. It was in the daytime. I laid down. I wasn't asleep yet, or perhaps I was. Perhaps it was just a hypnagogic state. But I felt I
Yeah.
was fully awake, lying down trying to sleep, having a hard time because it was sunny out, and I felt the bed depress markedly.
Yeah.
And I thought, what is my wife doing home from work right now? Should be working first shift.
Right.
And I looked up and there was nobody. And another time, I
Mm,
was walking through my kitchen, and we had a gas stove. And the pilots would sometimes go out, and you'd have to light them with a
yes.
match or something. And I was walking past my stove, and I heard a voice whisper right in my ear, and I didn't couldn't make out the words, but I knew the meaning.
Mm.
The meaning was look at the stove. So I looked at the stove, and I saw the pilot had gone out. And
Oh,
so it felt like something was warning me.
right.
It was so bizarre. And so many other things. My sister once reached out to touch when she lived there before me, to touch
Yeah.
the doorknob, and a doorknob turned before she could even put her hand on it.
Right.
And one time she was walking from one room to another, and there was like smoke, and she unconsciously kind of was waving the smoke away. And then she realized as she
Yeah.
passed into the room, there's no smoke. It was like, and her son saw this too. It was
Mm.
like it's kind of like mist in the air, and then it was just gone. And
Whoa.
and one time, my brother or his girlfriend at the time saw a figure standing in front of because they lived
Yeah.
upstairs, in front of the microwave, like cocking its head at it, as if it didn't understand what the microwave was,
All right.
and more and more. But I do know that I could not go into the basement of that house alone.
Yeah.
I would almost have a panic attack, and I'd want to run out. And I have a basement
Mm.
where I'm living now, and I can go down there in the middle of the night if the heat goes out or
Yeah.
something, and relight the water heater or something. And I'm never afraid. But that
Mm.
house, I was just terrified. I could not go down there without my dog beside me or something. So it was strange. There was something going on with that particular house.
And yet you're nostalgic for it.
Yes, yeah, because I didn't feel it was a malignant presence,
Mm.
as um, like my ex-wife said, she had an experience with that whispering voice. She felt there was one
Yeah.
time when somebody was whispering to her, wake up, wake up, wake up. And she woke up and she realized she really had to go to the bathroom. Now, it could have been her subconscious telling her, wake up, you've
Of
got to go to the
course, of
bathroom.
course.
But she felt it was like an external entity. But with
Yes.
in my case, who knows? With me too, maybe subliminally, subconsciously, peripherally, I saw the stove was out, and my subconscious told me, "Look at the stove." You don't know.
Yes.
You can't be too credible. But it,
Yes.
so even though it was creepy there, it didn't seem like dangerous creepy. It didn't seem like something was
Yeah.
there trying to mess with you, just something we cohabitated with, apparently.
Well, the closest thing I have to anything like that is so I had this friend, and this is about 3.5 years ago, and he died from a heart condition. He didn't tell people he was ill,
Oh,
so he had this underlying heart condition, and he died basically. And I was absolutely devastated because I really loved the man. And 4 days after his death, I was woken up by his voice calling my name, called my name twice,
oh wow,
both times with surprise and joy, like he wasn't expecting to see me, but he was really glad that he had. And
wow,
so a big part of me obviously wants to think that my friend came back briefly just to say hello or say goodbye, whatever.
oh
But
my.
at the same time, I'm thinking, now, is that the extended hypnagogic state? Was that just a very vivid dream? Did it really happen? So, I'm sort of reminded of it when you were describing some of your experiences.
That's,
But the head looking into the bedroom, that doesn't sound like you were in
yeah,
any extended hypnagogic state to
yeah,
me.
yes. And that story that you relate reminds me of a story, another story from that same house. I was my son was much younger then, he was small.
Yeah,
Um, I was sitting at my computer. My son was to my left. It was the 1 year anniversary of my father's passing. I knew
yeah,
that. I didn't mention this to my son. So to my right was a bedroom that we just used for storage. It was dark. So as I'm showing something to my son on the computer, my son is standing to my left. He looks around behind me into that room and he goes, "Grandpa," with a
Oh,
tone of recognition. And even today, when I hear
yes.
that story, I feel like I want to get gooseflesh. And I looked in that room and I didn't see anything. But he looked in that room with and exclaimed like in recognition. And it was the 1 year anniversary of my father's passing, and I had not told Colin about that. That was
Wow.
that was strange. And
That's a lovely thought.
it is a lovely thought that they come to talk to us or try to make contact with us. And I'm reminded
Yes.
my cousin Jody one time uh, picked up the phone and she heard a voice saying, "Marjorie, Marjorie." Marjorie was her mother, and the
Yeah.
voice that my cousin heard, it sounded to her like our great aunt Nell, who had passed away. It sounded to
Yeah.
Jody like Aunt Nell, and there's this voice saying, "Marjorie, Marjorie," and Jody asked the person, "Who is this?" And the voice said in
Mm.
gruffly, "It's your aunt." And then the connection was lost. God, was that our Aunt Nell calling from beyond the grave? I have a book called Phone Calls from the Dead, and it seems to be
Oh, right.
like a phenomenon that multiple people have experienced. And my mom got a call once that from
Mm.
somebody that she swore was a friend of our family named Bob. Bob, I don't know if I should give his last name,
Mm.
but Bob passed away in a house fire. And
Yes.
my mom would swear that she had got a call from him one time after he passed. She recognized his voice. I don't remember what mom said he had said, but she said she recognized Bob's voice and he had passed away tragically in a house fire. Who
Hey,
knows?
who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe we'll find out one day.
Yeah.
Hopefully a long time from now.
Yes, indeed.
Um, which straightway reminds me of Joe Pulver. Now, I believe you worked on a project with him once, didn't you?
Oh yes, yeah. Well, Joe had me invited me to a number of anthologies, such as Grim
Oh,
Scribe's Puppets,
yeah,
and also I edited one book of his short stories. Um, Actually, I
right,
edited two, and one came out from Hippocampus Press, and the other one, it never. I don't think we ever found a home for it, and
yeah,
maybe Kat is looking into finding another home for it or whatever. But I felt I felt I was honored to have been able to edit one collection for him. Um, and he was
yes,
again, like Willem Plugmeyer, he was just one of my dearest friends,
mm,
and we would have phone conversations that would go on for hours. And he was just another wonderful person, full of creative energy, so supportive of other creative people,
yes,
a wonderful figure,
yes,
and just like lives on as kind of a legend in the
yeah,
contemporary weird fiction community.
yes. It's nice to know that people are remembered.
Mhm.
Yeah. Sorry, kind of get lost in the nostalgia
Oh, okay.
sometimes.
Oh,
But I want to ask, what projects are you working on at the moment?
I am actually I as I don't know if I'd call them personally creative projects, but what I do
Mm.
kind of I'm retired, but what I do on the side is I am called a rewriter for a company that publishes a lot of manga and young adult novels. And what that boils
Right.
down to is, and I'm credited in these books with adaptation by
Yes.
what I do is somebody does the raw translation from Japanese to English, and I don't read Japanese, but I get the raw translation of a manga or a novel, and then I
Mm.
am supposed to polish it up for the
Yes.
English reader. In the case of the novel, it's very labor con, labor intensive, and I find
Yes.
myself restructuring almost every sentence, trying to do away with repetition, make it
Mm.
read, in a more kind of exciting voice without tampering with the story. That's why I
Yes.
hesitate to say that it's a creative endeavor. I'm not bringing any of my own creativity into it. I'm just trying to make it sound good. In the case
Yes.
of the manga, it's more about making things a little bit more clear if necessary, but mainly I find myself trying to make it more concise because
Yes.
you're dealing with the original Japanese word balloons, and Japanese is read vertically in addition to the books being read um, from back to front.
Mm.
So what I'm doing is I get a Word doc with the English translation. I get the original artwork with the Japanese. So I read what the translation is, and I try to visualize it fitting into those word balloons. And often I'm just
Right.
trying to make it more concise and read a little bit. Some translators or translations read a little bit more awkward than others. Some read quite well,
Yes.
but even the ones that read well, sometimes they need to be made concise or so.
Yes.
So I find myself. So I work on these projects on the side. I've got a manga going right now that I'm almost done with. And in addition to that, I just embarked on a new novel for Weird House Press, and this is going to
Yeah.
be a follow up to my novel. I might as well show it since it's right here beside me. This my
Please
latest
do.
novel is The Exploded Soul. It's a science fiction horror
Right.
novel for Weird House Press, and they have a line called Dark Moons. It's the Dark Moon series, and 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 so William Michael and if I'm saying that right, and Simon Clark wrote the first two volumes in this series, and they're not the novels aren't connected except that each novel in this series has to do with one of the moons in our solar system. And William Michael's
Yes.
book, A Murmuration of Opus, takes place on Europa, the moon of Jupiter. Simon Clark's book, Callisto Blood Mission, takes place on Callisto, another moon of Jupiter. And my book, The
Right.
Exploded Soul, takes place on Titania. It's the largest moon of Uranus. So I was asked to write another book in this series for next year. So I decided to do a follow up to this book with the same main
Mm.
character. and I was struggling to come up with what moon I was going to write about. And I decided to write about Hydra. It's a very, very, very tiny moon, misshapen moon of Pluto. So I chose that moon for various reasons. So I just embarked on a new novel for next year for Weird House Press. And other than that, I've written a couple short stories in the past month. I have a project. I was on the phone today. I can't get into it actually.
Yeah.
It would take my work into another medium, and it's very exciting stuff. But it's nothing's in stone yet. But tomorrow, these two people that I interact with are going to have a Zoom call with a well-known actor who has expressed interest in this project they've pitched to him, and another
Is
well-known
it
actor.
Tom Cruise?
No, not yet. But another actor, if I said this actor's name on Facebook, every single person who read the post would know who this is. And they presented the same project to that person. And this person this person read the script that I wrote
Yeah.
and said it was the best thing they'd read in a long time. And
Oh, wonderful.
they want on board. And their manager called my contacts and said, "So what's new with the such and such project?" And so they're working on it. My contacts are working on it. And so will it go all the way? We don't know. A lot of projects, they go almost all the way and then they don't pan out.
Yes.
And I've had a lot of movie people contact me over the past 20 years. Um, and I'd get a call or a text or
Yeah.
something. Is this project available? And but this thing that I'm alluding to, which I wish I could do more than vague book, but it's gone farther than anything ever has before. And
Oh, this is exciting.
yeah, so hopefully that momentum continues. I hope this meeting tomorrow goes well, and the person they're going to talk to is very connected, and so pieces are falling into place, and hopefully it continues,
Yes.
and I can reveal what it is and see it come to fruition. But we'll see. I'm certainly not counting on it, but I'm hoping for it.
Well, yeah. Yes, the vagaries. There's so many just thinking throughout my life of so many times that I've been peripherally involved in something or friends have been involved in something and it's and so's interested and they're invited for an interview out in and they've even flown all the way out there only at the last no, nothing
Oh
happens.
gosh, yeah,
But every so often something does
yeah,
happen.
yeah.
So
It happens to
but
somebody.
also
Yeah, so it has to be, it is, I guess I have a chance. But like I said, I'm not counting on it to the point where I'm going to be absolutely crushed if it doesn't work out because I know
yeah,
that it's like winning the lottery, but it is encouraging to hear, like I said, hear the feedback from that other actor and then this conversation that's going to happen tomorrow
mm,
and so forth. And the fact that my contacts have remained interested in this project. It's been ongoing for a while. I spent the better
yes,
part of a year writing this project I'm alluding to. And we're also talking about new projects too, that, in case this one doesn't pan out. But
yeah,
the fact that they just haven't lost faith in it and they're still pushing it and they're bringing it to different people, and a couple of people have passed on it. So it's
yeah.
encouraging, and we'll see. In the end, we'll see.
Okay, well, fingers crossed for
Sure.
that.
Yeah.
Well, as we're coming into the final stretch now, I
Mhm.
wonder if there's anything that you'd like to plug, anything by you or by somebody you know that you think
Sure.
the audience might be interested in?
Sure. Well, since I already plugged my novel, The Exploded Soul, um, my most recent collection, like I think I mentioned before, is Gods of a Nameless Country, but
Yes,
from Journalstone. I also have a little collection here, a mini
that's
collection
one
called.
hell of a title.
Thank you. And this is Scenes from a
And what
Village.
does that one say?
It's Scenes from a Village, published by
Right.
Oddness. And both these books are short story collections. This one's a very short story collection.
Yes.
But they both take place in a setting I call the unnamed country, which is inspired by my travels to Vietnam. My ex-wife is
Right.
Vietnamese, so my daughter's half Vietnamese, and I fell in love with Vietnam, and I've been there 13 times. And
Mm-hmm.
so, but as much time as I've spent there, I've had many wonderful experiences, but I didn't always know how to contextualize them. I didn't know that.
Yes.
I didn't understand. Like I'd see like a go by a rice paddy and see a gravestone right in the middle of it, and wonder, ask myself, what does that gravestone mean? You know,
Yeah.
and so being a fiction writer, I have written a few works that are set in Vietnam, like my novel The American is set in contemporary Vietnam, and a couple short
Yes.
stories. But for the most part, my impressions of Vietnam have found their way into stories in this fictitious Southeast Asian country
Yes.
called the Unnamed Country, and there's a reason why it's called that. But I love writing stories about there because I can incorporate all these impressions I have, many, many impressions of Vietnam, but I can also
Yes.
utilize my imagination and build the context for these things. And also I can introduce a lot of the supernatural into these stories. And
Yes.
so it's just a place that I like to write about. When I feel like taking a vacation from Punktown, I can always go over to the Unnamed Country and vice versa. But I love world building. It's probably what
Yes.
attracts me more than any other aspect of fiction writing is the world building.
Well, it's been absolutely wonderful having you on, Jeffrey.
Thank
Um,
you. Likewise, I'm so
and
appreciative.
yes. So I'm just going to basically wind up now and say thank you very much. Thank you to the audience for attending. I have seen that some of you have come in and listened, and for all of you who are watching after the fact, I hope you enjoy it. Hope you'll comment, subscribe, and buy Jeffrey Thomas's books. You won't regret it. Good
Thank you.
night, everybody.
Thank you.